The moment that changed everything. The classroom fell silent, a hush so thick it felt like the air itself held its breath. Marcus Tate's fingers danced the chipped, yellowed keys of the old upright piano, coaxing out a melody so rich, so alive, it seemed to breathe with a soul of its own. The notes, soft at first, then bold and soaring, wove a tapestry of blues that wrapped around every heart in the room, silencing smirks, shattering expectations. Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the teacher who'd orchestrated this moment to mock him, stood frozen, her arms crossed tight, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She'd meant to break him, to watch him falter under the weight of her disdain. Instead, she was the one undone, her smug certainty crumbling as this quiet black boy, the one she'd overlooked all year, turned her cruel game into a triumph no one would forget. It hadn't started like this. Just yesterday, Marcus had been invisible. A shadow in the corner of Jefferson Middle School's 6th grade classroom in Little Rock, Arkansas. He sat by the window, his pencil tapping a steady rhythm against his worn notebook, a habit his mother, Clara, always chided him for, though she'd never know how it steadied his racing thoughts. The room buzzed with the usual chaos of pre-lesson chatter, kids tossing crumpled paper balls, giggling over secrets Marcus was never part of. He didn't mind. He liked the quiet of his own world, the worksheet in front of him, a puzzle he could solve before the bell rang. History was his thing. Dates, names, battles, they clicked into place in his mind like pieces of a map he was born to read. Mrs. Harper stood at the front, her sharp eyes skimming her notes. 15 years in this classroom had carved her into a figure of authority. Strict, unyielding, a woman who ruled with a ruler's precision. To some, she was fair, a beacon of order in the storm of middle school. But Marcus knew better. She didn't shout at him, didn't scold him outright, but her fairness had a catch. It only shone on those she deemed worthy. Marcus, with his dark skin and quiet ways, wasn't one of them. When he raised his hand, her gaze slid past him like he was a ghost. When he answered right, she'd nod curtly and move on. When he slipped, rare as it was, she'd pause, her silence heavy with something he couldn't name but felt deep in his bones. "Yo, she acts like you're not even here," Jamal Carter, the lanky kid beside him, had whispered one afternoon, his voice low under the hum of the fluorescent lights. Marcus had shrugged, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Guess I've got teacher invisibility." It was easier to laugh it off than to dwell on the sting. But yesterday, something shifted. Mrs. Harper's eyes kept darting his way, not with anger, not with trouble, but with a glint of something sharper, something that made his stomach twist. Anticipation, maybe, or a predator sizing up its prey. The lesson started like any other, a dry run through the Civil War. Marcus scribbled notes, his pencil scratching against the paper as Mrs. Harper droned on about battles and generals. He waited for the usual, her voice calling on the same eager hands, skipping his like always. But then, out of nowhere it came. "Marcus," she said, her voice slicing through the room like a blade, crisp and deliberate. Heads turned. Marcus blinked, his pencil pausing mid-tap. She never called on him. Never. He straightened, eyes flicking to the board. General Sherman's March to the Sea. It was a campaign to break the Confederacy's resources and morale." A murmur rippled through the room. Mrs. Harper said, her tone clipped. "Not bad. Not bad." It was textbook perfect, and she knew it. Jamal shot him a wide-eyed glance. What the hell was that? But Marcus just sank back into his seat, heart thudding. The lesson rolled on, but the air felt different now, charged with something he couldn't place. She wasn't ignoring him anymore. She was watching. Then, just before the bell, she struck. "Marcus?" She called as kids shoved books into bags, their chatter rising. "Stay behind a moment." A few heads swiveled, eyes curious, but no one spoke. Marcus took his time, folding his notebook shut, his steps slow as he approached her desk. She sat there, hands clasped, her gray eyes glinting like steel. "I overheard you talking the other day," she said, her voice smooth but edged. About your grandfather. Marcus frowned, a flicker of unease curling in his chest. What about him? You said he was a musician. Her lips twitched, not quite a smirk, but close enough to make the room feel smaller. A pianist, wasn't it? Jazz? He nodded, cautious. Yeah. Interesting. She leaned back, fingers tapping the desk in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You must have picked up a thing or two. A little, he said, his voice steady despite the warning bells ringing in his head. Where was this going? Her smile widened, cold and thin. Good to know. The bell clanged, sharp and final. Marcus grabbed his bag, turning for the door, but her voice hooked him back. Tomorrow, she said. Let's see what you've got. He froze, turning. What? She gestured to the piano in the corner, an old upright thing, its wood scratched and keys dulled by years of neglect. You'll play something for the class. Why? The word slipped out before he could stop it. She tilted her head, amusement flickering in her eyes. Why not? You said your grandfather played. I'm sure you've got some of that talent in you. Her tone wasn't kind. It wasn't encouraging. It was a dare, a trap wrapped in a smile, and Marcus felt it like a punch to the gut. She didn't think he could do it. She wanted him to fail, to stumble in front of everyone, to prove whatever twisted point she'd already decided about him. The few kids still lingering by the door glanced between them, their silence loud with curiosity. Marcus met her gaze, his jaw tight. He wouldn't back down. Not now. Okay, he said, and walked out, the weight of her challenge sinking into his bones. That night, sleep eluded him. He lay in bed, the ceiling a blank canvas for his racing thoughts. Mrs. Harper's words looped in his mind, her smirk a ghost that wouldn't fade. This wasn't about music. It was about power, about her putting him in his place, or what she thought his place should be. She expected him to crash and burn, to fumble over the keys while the class snickered, and she nodded in quiet triumph. But she didn't know him. She didn't know the hours he'd spent at his grandfather's side, the old man's gnarled hands guiding his over the keys of a polished upright in their cramped living room. She didn't know the blues that lived in his blood, the jazz that hummed in his soul. His grandfather, James Tate, had been a legend in his own quiet way, a jazz pianist who'd played smoky clubs in Little Rock back when the city still buzzed with hidden rhythms. Marcus had been 5 when he first climbed onto the bench beside him, his small fingers fumbling over the keys while James chuckled, deep and warm. You've got it in you, boy, he'd say, his voice rough with years of smoke and song, just gotta let it out. By 10, Marcus could play runs that made his mother stop mid-stir in the kitchen, her eyes wide with pride. James had died 2 years ago, leaving behind his piano and a legacy Marcus carried like a secret flame. Mrs. Harper didn't know any of that, and tomorrow, she'd find out. Morning came too fast. Marcus walked into school, the air thick with whispers. Word had spread, Marcus is gonna play the piano today, and the hallway buzzed with it. You really doing this? Deshaun Brooks, a loud kid with a grin too big for his face, smirked as Marcus slid into his seat. Didn't know you were a piano guy, Jamal muttered beside him, half impressed, half skeptical. Marcus kept his eyes on his notebook, the pencil tapping faster now. There's a lot people don't know. Mrs. Harper swept in, her presence a storm cloud over the room. She set her books down with a thud, her gaze drifting to Marcus before she launched into the lesson. He barely heard her, the words blurring into static as his mind raced ahead. The piano loomed in the corner, a silent judge waiting for its moment. Halfway through class, she closed her book with a snap. Well, she said, her voice bright with false cheer, we've got time before the next lesson. Perfect. She turned to the piano, then to him. Marcus, let's see what you can do. The room shifted. Chairs creaked as kids leaned forward, some whispering, some smirking. Marcus didn't move at first, letting the weight of their stares settle over him. His heartbeat was steady, a drum keeping time. Then he stood, the scrape of his chair loud in the quiet. A muffled laugh rippled through the back, Someone, probably Deshawn. Marcus ignored it, walking to the piano with a calm he didn't fully feel. The instrument was a relic, its keys chipped, its wood scarred. He brushed his fingers over them, testing. Out of tune, just a hair, but enough to notice. He sat, hands hovering, and heard it, a snicker, sharp and deliberate. That was it. This wasn't just about Mrs. Harper anymore. It was about all of them. The ones who'd ignored him, the ones who'd laughed, the ones who'd never bothered to see him. He took a breath, deep and slow, and let his fingers fall. The first note spilled out, soft and steady, a blues progression, the kind his grandfather had played on sticky summer nights, the air thick with cicadas and sweat. His left hand laid down a rhythm, solid as a heartbeat, while his right wove a melody, smooth and sure. The room stilled, the whispers dying like a flame snuffed out. Mrs. Harper crossed her arms, her brows knitting. She'd expected a mess, stumbling hands, wrong notes, a boy out of his depth. Instead, she got this. A sound so pure it cut through her plans like a knife. Marcus didn't look up. He didn't need to. He sank into the music, each note a piece of him, a story of late nights at James's knee, of calloused hands guiding his own. The blues gave way to something bolder, a run his grandfather had taught him, intricate and fast, a dance of keys he'd wrestled with for months until it was his. The bass line rolled deep, the melody soared, and the room held its breath. Deshawn's smirk was gone. Jamal leaned forward, eyes wide. A girl in the back, Keisha, stared like she'd seen a ghost. And Mrs. Harper, her face tightened, her certainty cracking. Marcus pushed harder, the music swelling, filling every corner, every doubt. The final run was a storm, chords crashing against the walls, a crescendo that left no room for anything but awe. Then silence. The last note lingered, a ghost in the air before fading. Marcus lifted his hands, resting them in his lap, and waited. A clap broke the stillness, slow, then joined by another, then a flood. The room erupted, kids cheering, Jamal whistling low. "Damn," he breathed. Deshawn shook his head, muttering, didn't know he had that in him. But Mrs. Harper didn't move. She stood by her desk, arms still crossed, her face a mask. Unreadable, but not untouched. The applause rolled on, kids glancing between her and Marcus, the air electric with something new. She cleared her throat. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "that was unexpected." The clapping faded, replaced by murmurs. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus met her stare, unflinching. "My grandfather." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe regret, but it vanished. "I see." She tapped her desk, the sound sharp in the quiet. "All right, let's get back to our lesson." But no one moved. Jamal's brows shot up. Keisha looked cheated, like the moment had been stolen. Deshawn scoffed. "That's it?" Mrs. Harper's gaze snapped to him. "Excuse me?" He shrugged, gesturing vaguely. "He just played like something off a record, and you're just moving on?" Her mouth tightened. "This is a classroom, not a talent show." Marcus took a breath, his voice cutting through the tension. "You didn't think I could play, did you?" Her eyes darted to him, sharp as glass. He didn't flinch. "That's why you called me up here." Murmurs rippled through the room. Her fingers curled against the desk. "That's enough, Marcus." "You wouldn't have asked Jamal," he said, glancing at his friend, "or Keisha, or Deshawn. But you asked me." "Why?" The room froze, every breath held. Her jaw twitched, her control slipping. "You're out of line." "I don't think I am." For a moment she said nothing, her eyes dark with something she wouldn't name. Then, "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Marcus held her gaze a beat longer, then stood, slow and deliberate. The silence was heavy now, alive with unspoken things. He walked back to his seat, feeling every stare, every shift. Jamal gave him a nod, quiet and sure. Keisha watched, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Harper turned away, flipping open her lesson plan like she could erase what had happened. "Let's move on," she said, but the room didn't snap back. The energy lingered, whispers threading through the air. Deshawn leaned back, arms crossed. "Kinda weird how you don't want to talk about it." Her eyes flashed. That's enough. But it wasn't. Marcus had seen it. The crack in her armor, the flicker of doubt. And so had they. The rest of the class dragged on, her voice thinner, her authority frayed. When the bell rang, kids filed out, their murmurs a low hum. Marcus slung his bag over his shoulder, heading for the door, but her voice stopped him. Marcus. He turned. She looked like she might say something real, something raw. Instead, her face hardened. I hope you understand this is still my classroom. He studied her, then nodded. I know. A beat passed, heavy and still, then he walked out. In the hall, Jamal caught up, grinning. Bro, what was that? You flipped everything upside down. Marcus exhaled, a weight lifting. Yeah. You gonna play again? He thought about it, the keys under his fingers, the music filling the silence. A smile tugged at his lips. Yeah, I think I will. The walk home felt lighter, the sun dipping low over West Markham Street, shadows stretching long and thin. At the corner store, Mr. Jackson, the grizzled owner, eyed him with a knowing squint. You look like a kid who just did something big. Marcus paused, then smiled. Maybe I did. At home, the smell of fried catfish and cornbread hit him like a warm embrace. His mother stood at the stove, humming an old tune James used to play. You're late, she said, glancing over her shoulder. Long day, he replied, dropping his bag and sinking into a chair. Good or bad? He thought about the silence, the applause, the way Mrs. Harper's eyes had faltered. Good, he said. Really good. She turned off the burner, wiping her hands as she sat across from him. Want to talk about it? He nodded, and for the next 15 minutes he poured it out. The challenge, the music, the triumph. She listened, her face shifting from worry to pride to something softer. A quiet ache for the battles he'd already faced. When he finished, she sighed. Sounds like you made her uncomfortable. I think I did. And how do you feel about that? Like it was supposed to happen. She smiled, squeezing his hand. Good. The next day, school felt different. Not loud, not obvious, but shifted. Mrs. Harper ran her class the same, her voice sharp, her rules firm. But the air had changed. Kids saw her differently now, and they saw Marcus too. At lunch, a few stopped by his table, Keisha wide-eyed saying, Dude, you were insane on that piano. How long you been playing? Since I was 5, he said. Jamal shook his head. You've been holding out on us. Marcus smirked. Guess so. Across the cafeteria, Mrs. Harper passed, tray in hand. Their eyes met, brief and sharp. This time she looked away first. Marcus kept eating, a quiet victory settling in his chest. Some lessons don't come from books. Some moments rewrite the world, whether people want them to or not. Mrs. Harper had spent a year looking past Marcus, dismissing him with every glance she didn't give. In a few minutes, he'd made sure she'd never do it again. She might never admit it, her pride wouldn't let her, but it didn't matter. Marcus knew something she didn't. When they try to silence you, to box you in with their doubts, the best answer is to let your talent roar. And when it does, they'll have no choice but to hear you.